So, Matt, tell me a bit more about what's on your mind regarding our ancient minds and our everyday world. I'm really curious to know more about that.
So this is something I talk a lot about in my work. I'm a clinical psychologist, so you'd imagine I sit and I talk from medical books and good clinical guidelines. In a sense, I do, but I also have leaned much more into our evolutionary history. So I use evolutionary psychology. Really, I think it comes from a compassionate view of mental health and suffering and growth and aspirations to help people really understand that your brain, everything about you, your inheritance, your neurobiology, your very being, your anatomy, this has been inherited over 4 billion years of life that has come on this planet.
That's a lot of years.
It's too many years for us to actually appreciate and comprehend.
Right.
4 billion. Who knows what that actually means? It's a very long time. We know that much. But even in that history, we think about one of the things I do, James, when I do my trainings with teams, is that I'll often do training outside in nature. You'll see why it's so important that we spend time in nature in a second. But I'll be out in nature and I'll get the group to sit along 10 meters. And every meter of that journey represents a jump in time, 4 billion years in 10 meters. And I talk the story through of what happens in life on this planet, because I was never taught this at school. I learned it at university because I was so interested, and I learned more. And as you go through, you realize that life developed pretty soon after this planet formed. So 4 billion years after 4.6 billion years, as far back as we can go, we can imagine. And then life on this planet was largely single cellular for a very, very long time. And it's only, I'll do a very short version. We'll go all the way to the end. And it's only that the tip of the needle of the blade of grass at the end of my story is where humans came into this world. That much time. So 99.99% of our life on this planet has been us in nature, born into a natural world. Humans, Homo sapiens, came around about 250,000 years ago. If we went back 250,000 years ago, James, we'd look at people and they dress differently, but we'd say they're the same as you and me. They look no different. And you think even that feels like an unbelievably long time. 250,000 years feels like a very long time. And so nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing has changed in terms of our neurobiology, our anatomy. And so our wiring is still the same. Like the basic building blocks of how we function is still the same. So then I bring it all the way back to the present day. And then we talk about why some of the modern challenges are so hard for us, why people fall into experiences of high anxiety, depression, hopelessness, perfectionism, burnout, all these modern day experiences. I make sense through two lenses. One is clinical psychology understanding of our experience in the present day from mental health and from a neuropsychological perspective. But I think we need to also hold on to a very human and inherited compassionate view of this stuff comes from a very long time ago with good reason why we have a negativity bias, why we see the worst in things, why we can't help but scan and problem solve, but also mentally rehearse terrible situations that might happen in life, or go back and rehash horrible things that happened in life. All these things we do so naturally, they're not pathological in nature. They come from a well-intentioned place, but it's just maybe the wrong time we're using them, or we're using them in the wrong context. And so in shorthand, we were dealing with the battle for survival for most of our existence. And now for the most of us, now I say most, I'm talking as a privileged position, being in England and having most of my basic needs, all of my basic needs catered for. I'm not worrying that I'm not going to have food or shelter tomorrow, which I'm very lucky to be in that position. I'll state that. So most of us aren't worrying about the battle for survival. Instead, we've now got the battle for meaning and purpose. And that is not something our neurobiology was wired for. That's a hard task, because we're not actually designed to do meaning and purpose. We're designed for survival.
That's not in our survival makeup. Meaning and purpose doesn't feature.
Do you need meaning? I mean, we would say you need meaning and purpose. Perhaps we say it's the central thing. Like, what is life? What was the meaning of it? What's happiness? And we'd say it's the most important thing. But it's not that important if you're trying to do the three things, which is our inheritance, which is avoid danger, find resources, food and shelter, and pass on your genetic code. We just think about the basics of basic building blocks of being animal.
Yeah.
Meaning and purpose doesn't actually matter for survival. Today, it matters for survival in our sense, because we think, what's life worth living if it doesn't have meaning and purpose? And there are many, many studies, great evidence to say that meaning and purpose are some of the main things we need for our well-being.
Okay.
But I think it's important to remember that's a very recent thing that we're tackling with,
In
and it's why all of
evolutionary
us,
terms. Yeah.
in evolutionary terms, that's why we're struggling with it so much. So, as a clinical psychologist, we have a method to our madness. We have a method to all the things that we do, and the method of any treatment, whether it's a group, whether it's working with an individual, whether it's working with teams, the methodology is assessment, formulation, intervention. So, first of
Assessment,
all,
formulation, intervention.
intervention.
Okay.
Always in those three stages. That's in essence the training, the way they train your brain to think, like a scientist, practitioner, and hopefully more than just a scientist practitioner. You just get trained to be how to be a good human and how to feel.
I get it.
But some psychologists would say you don't need to feel. You just need to do the method. No, you need to feel with someone. But assessment, formulation, intervention. So first of all, the thing to do is assessment is to really get to know somebody. And the process of doing that with somebody or a team, but stay with individuals, a bit easier to conceptualize, is to help them also start to ask questions about themselves and think, where did this come from? This problem you're facing now. What is the problem exactly? You say I'm coming to you for burnout. Now, when you say burnout, what do you actually mean by that? How's it showing up for you? When did it first start? Where do you think it goes back to? What kind of things did you learn in early life? So by doing lots of exploration, we end up with a formulation, which a formulation is a shared understanding of someone's experience. And it's trying to help match why you're struggling with the thing it is now, the problem, and to think about how that came about. So it's a story of how that came about. Make that as complex or as simple as you want. And then, what's going to help going forward? So then the last intervention then means anything we're saying we're going to do with somebody needs to match the reasons why this problem developed and fit with your worldview, and make sure that it's actually going to tackle the root causes, long-term behavioral change, long-term distress change. So when I think about how the clinical bit and how the evolutionary psychology bit meets up, one part of that is you really have to understand the story of where do you come from to really understand the problem that's come about. So talking about childhood, early life experiences, what happened in utero, what was your life like? What did you know of your family life like? Was there a lot of stress around? How did you get born into this world? Culture, society, family, school experiences, significant adverse life events. But also the longer story of we all struggle with certain things from our inheritance. Like we all struggle with pessimism. We all look to the worst of things because it's an evolutionary advantage to see the worst in things rather than see the best in things. It keeps you alive. Yes. So part of the formulation I deliver is, because it's a delivery, we work it out together, but I'll write a letter, and we'll talk about it early on in sessions, is that I want to present a compassionate view of why it is someone's struggling with someone, rather than a diagnostic medical view. You have X. My job as a clinical psychologist is to say it's understandable that given Y that you're struggling with X. And because that is understandable, we now need to think about having the right change, the right tools, or acting differently that's going to lead to the results that you want. Right. So it's a bridging experience. So my job is to do the bridging with somebody, and to really, the idea is to get them alongside you, because the best formulation in the world, if I've done this before, where you've got the best idea in the world about why you think someone's struggling and it's your idea, it's not co-created, then somebody will say, yeah, that sounds clever. It doesn't feel right. So we have to get them on board to be like, they're feeling it. We're testing it out in those early sessions, and I'll be asking questions. I wonder how this resonates, or I wonder if you were like that as a kid. So I wonder if as a kid, you always were looking out for when the next argument was going to happen with your parents. I wonder if you learn to be really good at noticing small changes in people's facial reactions in their presentation. Maybe did you learn early on to be really hyper aware of what's happening with other people's emotions? Maybe I'll be exploring what happens within you. Like, did that mean that you paid less attention to your own feelings and more to other people's feelings? So
Right.
I'll be testing things out until we get to the point of having that shared formulation. But I think compassion is key in all this. Rather than shame, which is the shutdown experience, which a lot of people come to therapy for, where they're feeling very shameful and like they can't talk about this with anybody. We want to open up conversation, and compassion, I think, comes from saying, yeah, it's understandable. This is your protective instincts. That's the evolutionary psychology part of it. This is you trying to protect yourself. It's just not working how you want it to. But yeah, do you know what? You're being clever about it. It's just not quite working as well as you want. But it comes with good reason why you're doing that thing.
And I'm wondering about the compassion part, what you think of where we're at as a species regarding compassion.
Oh.
I know. Let's dive
question,
in, because I'm so curious to understand from your experience, considering compassion is such a key component to helping people change and grow and evolve. Something feels to me like it's going on where we're losing the capacity to feel compassion in some ways.
My mind goes to two words. It goes between competition and collaboration, where those are two key tasks. I'll go back to some evolutionary social anthropology words. So key tasks of being in a tribe is that at times we need to collaborate. Actually, the great human advantage is that we learn to collaborate as a species. So you put a naked human being in the wild, we're soft and we're fleshy and we don't survive very long. We've got no natural weapons about our person and we are very easy to harm.
Unless
So we don't
Bear
survive.
Grylls, of course.
Unless you're Bear Grylls. Wow. Bear Grylls usually has something with him. So usually the collaboration bit was once we were in a tribe, in a team, we could do amazing things. We really learned how to defeat foe through group tasks. But one of the group tasks we had was to also pass down shared knowledge. So through language development is a key change for our human brains. More on language later about how it gets us into tricky problems. But one of the great advantages, you can pass down knowledge. So Bear Grylls inherits a huge amount of knowledge from our ancestors about which species, plant species, what things are good to eat, how to build shelters, how to do all these things. So collaboration and working together has been a great thing for our human species, but we also are incredibly competitive. And one of those things is there are finite resources on this planet, or unequal distribution of resources on this planet, so they appear finite. And actually, it's in many interests to try and keep some resources finite, because that creates inequality that also creates wealth. So without being too political about it, there are reasons why people have an unequal distribution. My impression is people feel more limited in what they have, more scared and more vulnerable. They are going to be driven to be more competitive. As part of our nature is to think, all right, well, I need more, and if the only way for me to have more of what I want is to then have to push you away, or even to transform in their mind psychologically that the problem is with you. You're the reason why I don't have what I want. Person of said gender, ethnicity, race, that we get more into psychologies of hate and psychologies of us and them, and I think the world politically at the moment, there's a lot of narrative around us and them and division and competition. And that narrative does not feel compassionate. There doesn't feel a lot of compassion in larger narratives we're seeing.
So I wonder if it's something about the competition element that you speak of that might end up overshadowing or eclipsing compassion in people if they feel deeply entrenched in having to fight, compete, and to strive to win, then maybe compassion levels go way down.
I wonder whether it's something around fear and how compassionate you can be when you're feeling very fearful. Because we would say nearly all our behaviors are driven by protective instincts. If we think about it from that sense, avoid danger, find shelter because we're fearful we don't have enough food or shelter, and pass on a genetic material, that kind of undeniable human fear of mortality, that we will cease to exist and we want to pass something on, or we want to live forever. You have kids, somehow you keep living on. But fear is a powerful driver, and I think people are at their worst. We are, as all of us, are at our worst when we're scared. And there's a lot of scared people in this world. I get very scared living in this world. We all get scared at different times, but I think it's hard to be, if we go back to what it means to be empathic, is that to really sit to be empathic is to be able to mentalize, put yourself in the shoes of another. More than just the task of mentalization, getting it, it's like feeling it with them. So you've got to tap into something vulnerable within you to also get somebody to feel as if you're being with them, to be truly there with the emotional experience. I remember this thing in me that feels close to what they're describing, and that allows me to feel something that feels similar to them, and then together we feel like we're in it together. I think if you're in a place of fear, it's very hard to then connect with the vulnerability, because you're going to want to protect yourself. And it strikes me it'd be harder to be compassionate when you're scared and fearful.
Yeah. It's a potent force, fear, right? It can consume us, it can overtake us, and maybe there isn't any room when we're in acute fear to feel compassionate.
And that's where I think coming to therapy or speaking with a professional, where you get to learn what's the thing you are fearful of and how does it take shape for you, is really important. And I would contend much more important than a diagnosis of a medical term. So anxiety is the medical, it's a medicalized word. It comes from the medical dictionary. The doctors came up with that word anxiety to fit into a diagnostic statistical manual. So anxiety, we use it every day. I'm feeling anxious, I've got anxiety. But actually that's the words underneath that are fear, worry, trepidation, more human experiences of those words. And I think you're right to then not just say, well, I have anxiety, is to work with somebody or to do this work for yourself, to work out, well, what is it I'm fearful of? What is it I'm scared about? What am I really worried about? And when you do that work, then you open up more possibilities to then work out where it comes from and then work out how to manage it, more than just reduction in overall anxiety. So then you get into the world of very different explorations of different ways of helping someone or different approaches. So somebody says, I have panic attacks. So panic attack is fear of fear. It's a catastrophic spiraling of feeling fear, massive physical apprehension about the embodied experience of fear. So you feel somatically, your heart's racing, you can't breathe enough, and then you get terrified that you can't get oxygen in. And then the feeling of it is so overwhelming, is a cycle of panic. How you would treat panic would be a very different way you'd approach somebody's fear of failure or fear of mortality. Then with like a fear of mortality, which I work with some of my clients, there's existential work we're going to do about what does it mean to live in this world and who do you want to be and your identity. Fear of panic, we're going to work on real strategies about how to manage the somatic experience of a panic attack, and strategies and grounding and stabilization. They're completely different ways of supporting someone, but you could say it's about anxiety, and then you lose the actual helpful part of understanding and why that's okay.
Yeah, we lose the story, we lose the context, it feels. We lose the person and all of their life experience, generational influences and biological factors, not just looking at the use of one word and then going, oh, okay, we'll treat that.
And I think it's helpful to really understand this, that a medical diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, I say medical because a psychiatrist would be the one who gives you a medical diagnosis. Now, not everyone knows how that works. So I think it is like working out why they do it and how they do it, because then you get to understand there is more to the picture than just the label. I say label as in diagnosis, usually the one.
Right.
So you go to a doctor and you say, I'm really struggling. I'm feeling really groggy. I just can't feel motivated. I'm not feeling good about myself. I see myself poorly. It's affecting my life. I can't get up and shower as well as I can't work hard. And I have really poor self-esteem. And I'm beginning to think maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe it gets more extreme than that. So when you go to a doctor, what they're looking at, how do we treat that? If you're a medical doctor, they'll be thinking about what kind of intervention will help. So is it a pharmaceutical intervention, drugs? You can take some medication to help. They need to work out the most effective, well-validated method to treat that cluster of symptoms. So there are books, there are diagnostic manuals that you look through, which cluster symptoms. So in the UK, we use the ICD-10 or the DSM-5 or 6. I have to check.
I think it's 5.
5. And they would cluster those symptoms into, say, shorthand, the thing they cluster together best for is depression. And they might go into a more focused version of depression. And then once we have that, then we know through many studies, the most well-validated thing to support it is a drug like an SSRI. And they'll pick the one they think is the most useful for the person. And then a bit of trial and error. So the way that they work is through the scientific method, and they're going to make sure they following their hypotheses, and they're going to come up with the best label diagnosis and then the best treatment that's been evidenced to help that. Now that's really helpful for many people, and absolutely SSRIs or anti-anxiety meds or antipsychotics can be very helpful. But the thing they don't do is they don't really understand why that person came to them in the first place. What are the reasons that led to that cluster of depressive symptoms? And they don't teach the skills or change the underlying reasons why someone came in the first place. So that is the work of clinical psychology, where we then take over. We work hand in hand often with psychiatry, and we will work with the story, the understanding of why it is that you've got to this point and what's going to need to change. What skills or self-understanding do you need to then change the course of where this is headed? Right. And so that's the central difference between psychiatry and clinical psychology. And I think an important one where you can then see diagnosis and labels are, in my world, rather than right or wrong, because you could maybe take a different diagnostic cluster and have a different label, rather than it being absolutely right or wrong, because humans are far too complex for single labels. They're helpful or unhelpful. And they can often be very helpful because they get treatment and often leads you to access to services. Often people feel like great, it's not just me. Actually, I'm wired this way. Maybe you have a label diagnosis of neurodivergence, and you say my brain is wired in this way I've got ADHD and I'm a person with ADHD, and you go, that's great. Then I don't have to fight it. I need to work with it. But then we need to hand over to meaning of it, and that's clinical psychology. And then what's going to work for you, rather than my books don't tell me that for this person do X. My books tell me find out about that person. And through all of that, we will then work out their unique intervention method, not a manualized approach. They need this because of these reasons from their experience.
That's beautifully put, and it really puts the person at the heart of the treatment. And I know that we live in a world where we have, various competing forces, like the medical model, being so dominant, for example. But there is a place for it, but there's also a place for then how to integrate that into the person and to then help them get to know themselves in a different way, which then helps them find relief, confidence, self-awareness, without putting a human being at the heart of it. I feel we'd really struggle to truly tailor our therapeutic work.
But the worst thing that can happen, and I unfortunately do see it from time to time, is that people feel dehumanized in the experience of going to a mental health team at their worst moment in life. Like I've worked in inpatient and community teams, and it becomes your work. That's where you see every day you see people turn up and you're working with them. But for the people who show up and they come to you for an assessment, the first point of contact, they're coming to you probably the worst day or days of their life. And at that time, people need care and compassion and respect.
And in a clinical setting, it feels to me, at least, that's possibly one of the worst environments to be in when we're so vulnerable, which I know that it's better to go somewhere to ask for help, but thinking about all of the environmental factors, the intensity of being in a setting like A&E, for example, when you're going there for something emotional, it feels just like it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And
although I've been to A&E a few times with my kids late at night and things like that, and I'd actually say they're scary places to be. You're surrounded by people who are in distress. Sometimes people don't want to be there. You see people there because other people are worried about them, or people in a very, very dangerous state, physically or mentally. They're really at a point of life threat. So it's a very scary place to be. And one of the big changes I made to my practice was as I learned more and more about our natural roots, and I spent more time working with the outdoors and working with nature, I've shifted my practice to not only help us understand ourselves as animals and as nature, to go out into nature for a lot of the experiences, because, or to be very mindful about the kind of space people come into. Where you see me from now is my online place. This is my consulting room, but I see people online. But even there, it's important that it's a space that hopefully doesn't feel too clinical. I'm a clinical psychologist, but it doesn't feel too, well, I guess there's something clinical about dehumanizing it, isn't there? There's something that feels like generic and bland. And hopefully there's a bit more life here, and especially when you go outdoors anyway. We're going into a world with far less hierarchy between helper and the person being helped,
Very much.
less ownership of place, and far more space to be human. And I know I show up differently, and I'm sure, well, the research shows and my clinical experience says people show up differently when you take them into different places like that.
And I think the gap between professional and client, patient is shrinking. A lot of professionals can hide behind professional facade, and actually we're bringing our humanness first now with our training and experience and expertise, but we're bringing genuineness, we're bringing sincerity. We're not hiding behind title. We're relating to people more, I think. But going back to something you said about being out in nature, I was thinking to myself, sometimes, I don't know if you've heard this, there's a rather dismissive or flippant rhetoric around being out in nature, where my doctors just told me to go out for a walk or go and spend time in a park, and people are quite blasé about it, and they don't really get the benefit and the necessity of nature. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are there, because it feels like people have moved so far away from being able to connect with it and understand that because we're animals, we need it. It's almost like this modern day world created such an illusion of separation from nature now.
But there is so much about how things are delivered too, right? So definitely when you come up to somebody and say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, my partner's leaving me, I've just lost my job, my life's feeling not where it's meant to be, I'm meant to be 20 years ahead of where I am, I've just lost everything. And then somebody goes to you and doesn't look at you and looks at a screen and says, what you need is another walk or drink more water. You go, for fuck's sake. Say,
like,
oh my. Okay, well, I'm not going to come back. Thanks very much. Yeah. And you need to connect with someone. One of my first experience of my clinical mental health experience was working for a CAMS team, so a children and adolescent mental health team. And my supervisor had an absolute clear view. His view was that the treatment, the intervention was the most important thing, and that there was no human needed to make that work or not work. You follow the approach and the evidence and the tool, the strategy, very CBT focused, follow the method, and people will get better. You don't matter. The helping person doesn't matter. And I said this very extreme version of following that scientific practitioner method. And I would completely disagree. I would say the human really matters in the experience, how we relate. But maybe more than that, connection really, really matters.
Yeah.
So coming back to nature, so I don't think the delivery was helpful, and I hear that a lot. I think the bit is that we are disconnected from our natural world, and that's not normal for our human species. We privilege modern technology, and we privilege cleanliness, and we privilege four walls and comfort, but that's not how we were designed and evolved. So there's now really, really good peer-reviewed journal evidence about things like nature connectedness. Google that, you'll find out a couple thousand articles. I created a therapy model called ecosensory therapy about how we connect our natural ecology, our backgrounds, and our sensory experiences of this world to really help us. When we look at the research, there's really good evidence about how spending time in nature will reduce stress. Actually, so much so that if you spend 2 hours in the natural environment, particularly a wooded environment, you get something like a month's stress buffer in you.
Go back out to the woods near me as soon as we finish this call.
Yeah. There was a team. So in a lot of the research started in Japan by Professor, I'm going to say it's Ji or Ki, and he and his team were instructed. Japan's not a very big country with a very large population. And so the way you deal with that is to build more buildings. And then they were tasked with, well, how do we preserve the natural spaces of this country? And so a medical team, he's part of the medical team, came together and they said, well, how can we evidence the health benefits of this? Is there something we could do from that sense? So they started the majority of the research on Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, which is not
Yes,
being
I've heard of that.
which is not being naked in the forest.
No.
Not that kind of bathing. It's paying attention on purpose to the natural world around you in natural environments. It's mindfulness in nature, paying attention. So, and what they found when they did their research, they've done a number of hundreds of papers now, all from like saliva swabs, so they can measure cortisol levels, to I think they've done things with EEG machines, so they're looking at brain activity as well as questionnaires and so forth. It's a whole wealth of different qualitative and quantitative data, and the results show time and time again, time in nature reduces stress. It will improve mood, so how you feel about yourself. That there's studies to show it will increase your immunocompetence, so your ability to fight disease and illness will improve by time in nature, or as simply as seeing green and natural spaces. So they've worked. There's one part of our white blood cells called they call it shorthand the natural killer cells. So the particular part of our white blood cells that's very good at fighting infection and disease. We can observe that. We can measure that. We can see how much that's influenced and increased by time in nature, particularly when we spend time around the phantasides, the smells and the terpentines of what happens from the soil and the trees when we're spending time in there. So then hospitals have been taken account, and good hospitals. There's ones in Norway, Finland. The Scandinavian countries are better at this than us. They have built hospitals in the forest or with views of the forest, knowing the health benefits. I worked with a team where they have their recovery center actually in the forest because they know it's so good for recovery. So they've looked at patient recovery times. People get out quicker from surgeries when they have natural views outside their window versus cement views and brick building views.
We're seeing walls, we're seeing brick, we're seeing concrete, we're seeing tarmac, we're seeing metals. We're not seeing enough of nature. But funny when you said that about forest bathing, because I thought to myself when you spoke earlier about the importance of nature, I was thinking about what when we talked about A&Es being a scary place. I was like, what if A&Es were in a forest? Like, that's where my brain went. Let's all sit down in a circle in a forest. And I know that might sound a little bit sort of far away from reality, but I thought, well, there you go. You've just reinforced my little musing there in my own head of, well, people are starting to get it. Places like Norway, they're building hospitals in forests, which is incredible.
Well, and when you said before about like the flippant idea that just go out into nature, now it's not a cure-all. Like going for a walk in nature is not going to fix everything. It can't fix everything, and that's where we come back to really, going with somebody or going for a reason or knowing why you're going or having the skills about how to work with nature. So if you're going because you've got attentional fatigue, so that's another area that is particularly useful in going to nature, is to restore our attention. So our focus, selective attention, the attention, I can't focus, my brain's so distracted. We'd say, okay, well, you're going to go spend some time in nature for these reasons, and this is some activities and things to do that will help improve your concentration and restore your focused attention, which is susceptible to fatigue. So you could say that's the reason to go in. Or you're saying I'm really finding it hard to feel motivated and I feel like I need more physical activity. Then probably going to need someone to go with you and to work with building up activation and to engage with the natural world in a way that for them brings some element of intrigue or curiosity that allows them to start moving and switch on their excitement part of their brain. You can't just say go out into nature. Not to mention, for many people, going into nature will actually feel very foreign and actually will feel scary and alarming for them. They'll say, what do you mean? I don't do that. It's messy. It's muddy. There's things that can bite you. There's spiders. And they go, I don't want to be there. There's dogs. I don't want to do that. And for many people, it will increase threat and alarm because we've been so distant from it. So there's support that's needed. There's some good work around green social prescribing, which can be done poorly and done better about helping people go, don't just go spend time in nature. Let's think about why you're going to spend time there and how to do it.
Yeah, bring it to life, put it in context, guide people in how to navigate through that experience, especially if it's very, very new. Otherwise, like you say, they could be very overwhelmed, freaked out, fearful. Equally, a lot of people perhaps don't have that much green around them. So how do they access it if they're in a very built up area, if they don't have anywhere they feel they can go?
Absolutely. And sometimes the right intervention is nothing to do with nature. It's something else. We need to talk about meaning and purpose. We'll go back to that bit. Or we need to talk about the loss they've just been through, they're bereaved and they're grieving. Or actually the thing that's going to make the biggest difference for that person is to find a way back into work. And we need to find a way back into work and what's stopping that from happening. I absolutely believe time in nature is beneficial to us all, but I'm not going to stand here on a soapbox preaching and saying, just spend time in nature, it will fix all your problems. We know it will help a tremendous amount to spend time in nature for health, mental health, for connection. We know all those things have been proved to be enhanced when we spend time in nature. But unguided experiences of nature can't just be a cure-all. Nothing in this world can. That's why I'm very scared of dogma. There's nothing in this world that's absolute. We come back to the person and helping them and guiding them and knowing what they need for the right reasons.
Tell me more about your work then in bringing all of this together.
My work's really varied, which is a great privilege of what I get to do. I do one-to-one psychology. So I would work from, and I'll split that up into suffering and performance psychology. So people are coming for reasons of really struggling in life to the point of self-harm and suicidal ideation and feeling really at a really difficult patch in life, to helping people achieve what they want in life. And inevitably, we also find it very hard to move forward because we always have our internal barriers and blocks and reasons why we hold ourselves back. So that's my one-to-one work. So anything from clinical psychology to performance psychology. I then work with families, and I would do all of that either online or in nature. I'll tell you about how to do that in nature. I do family work. A lot of my career was working around young adults who've been through traumatic experiences, particularly people who have been in the care system. So fostering, kinship care, adoption. And so I ended up doing a lot of adoption-based work in nature. And my speciality seemed to be father and son work in nature. So adoptive fathers with their sons spending time in nature. And then teamwork. And so I take teams out and I do retreats out in nature as well for groups and teams. So those are my different bits that I do. And all of those
have powerful work.
I love that I get to do lots of different things. And there's all about setting. A lot of that happens online. A lot of that happens in places of work or places where people go to. But I try to really bring as all of that can work in nature. And I really try and encourage people to do that with me in nature.
Tell me more about that. I'm so curious.
All
How
right.
does that actually play out in reality?
Yeah. So the same thing would work about assessment, formulation, and treatment. We still do the same method, but okay. So so if I take some individual or father and son, what changes when we go out into nature is there's far less talking, because the primary method of intervention is always talking when I'm working with someone. Once again,
we've got a lot of words and a lot of language to try and figure out.
Exactly. Actually, I usually shut up quite a lot when I'm in a session. I don't usually talk so much. I listen and I ask questions. That's what I do when I'm in a session with someone. Like this is great, James, because you want me to talk, and I love that I get the opportunity to talk about things I'm so passionate about.
I love the passion. It's wonderful.
But when I go outdoors, talking is just one of many different things we can do to help and support. So I go to local woodlands. I spend time in woodlands. That's where I prefer to spend time. I will find a woodland that is near the person or the family where they live, so that whatever benefits they receive from this space and how they learn to be in it, they can keep doing this long after we're finished and in between sessions. Because that's, again, the other danger of you working with somebody in a clinic or with a therapist. they go, great, well, I'm all good while you're here and I'm with you. But then when we finish, it's like you're taking away all the place where I feel comfortable, and you're taking away all the tools. So I want to teach people the tools and the way to be as far as possible. And that's the nice thing about working in a local nature space, community forests, local woodlands, just public spaces that they're not private spaces I go to most often. They're usually really accessible places so they can keep going. And when we're in there, we'll have fun. Like honestly, therapy changes from something that is problem focused to something that is far more human and rich. So we will spend time exploring. I've got I don't know if you can see in my picture right now. I've got a model up here of the way I work outdoors from ecosensory therapy. And
okay, no, I can't quite see it from
here. There's a tree model, and so we've taken several elements. Me, Claire, and Chris, who came up with this model. We've taken several elements. I'm going to turn around so I can see. So we'll think about these 8 elements that are core that we can work with outdoors. We'll talk about grounding, finding ways to interact with the natural environment to ground ourselves, to nourish ourselves. And we'll think about an assessment and formulation, how people struggle with grounding or nourishing themselves, and then working out how we can get more of that. Connection, rhythm, that's a huge piece of this, our biological rhythms, our seasons of change, our seasons of life. Right. We're going to work with that in the forest, and the natural affordances that nature gives us to reflect on those and build metaphors and to interact with it. We'll think about attending, so how to mindfully attend to the world. We've got a whole world of mindfulness, meditative ways we can attend on purpose to nature. Create, we build a lot. I do a lot of building and construction, den building, knot tying, art making.
Who doesn't love to build a den, right? That's super cool.
Exactly. And as a family, as a father and son, what a great activity. We're all things like creating, nourishing, creating. I'll cook in nature with people a lot. We'll make sausages over campfire. We'll make bread from scratch. We'll make teas, coffees, popcorn in nature. You name it, we'll try our best, and everything tastes better outdoors. Discovery. So I spend a lot of time really looking in nature and getting people. So if I've got a young kid, we might discover what's underneath rocks, underneath trees. We might discover the life cycle of the frog. We might go and explore parts of this world, this natural world they don't know about or they're very interested by. Somebody's got a specialist interest in. One of my young gentlemen with autism is absolutely expert in entomology, the study of bugs. So we will lean into that and feel mastery and exploration in that, and reflection as well. So of course, everything we do, I will just spend a lot more time playing and bringing joy and fun, balancing, climbing, tree climbing, being risky, because we've got to engage in risk, and there's a key life skill to learn how to navigate risk safely as adults too. But then being in nature, the bit I do that's talking might be more metaphorical association. So it might be something like, we saw this experience, how's that kind of like life? So I don't know. The simplest thing I can think of is that the seasons seem to change and we continue to be out here and everything seems to change and yet stay the same. How is that like your life right now? And people might reflect on they're in a stage of winter, but after winter always comes spring. And so it makes experiences feel far less permanent and more transitory, because our internal experiences are transitory. They're never permanent. Nothing changes.
Exactly. Everything is transitional in nature. It's psychological nature and nature. Nothing stays the same forever.
Yeah.
That's a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
It's a very powerful metaphor that can be both incredibly comforting and it can be incredibly distressing. That we like to hold on to things. Again, if we come back to our ancient roots, we don't like uncertainty, because the more certain we are, the more chances we can control, the more chances we can survive. So once we go into unpredictability, which is even connecting with this idea that nothing in this world will ever remain, stay the same. That's a scary thought, because then, well, how will I cope when it's not the same? Well, I like it right now. I don't want it to change. And we hold on to change and we create distress inside when we think, oh my gosh, I'm losing my grip. It is changing. So that's a hard process for some people.
It is. You hear it a lot. People say, I hate change. And you think that's important.
Yeah. And I hear, I fear change.
I fear change. Yeah. I don't like change. I hate change. I fear change. I'm not good with change.
Yeah.
And you think,
Yeah.
oh, if you think metaphorically, philosophically, you think, wow, that's an important statement.
And none of us like change. None
No,
of
I
us, none
suppose.
of us are good with change.
Do you think we can learn to change our relationship with change?
I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah.
Of course, it's hard. I lean a lot on metaphor because of all this, and and a lot of work I do with men. I lean in more into metaphor as well because sometimes it's a bit more accessible, some of that language than emotional
Yes.
language.
Yes.
But I also, we have to go to appreciate the light. You have to go to the darkness.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to find our way to like embrace change and like what's about to happen, you do actually have to connect with the dark, scary bits of that. And that is the route to being more comfortable with change, is acceptance, or another word, maybe acceptance is quite a loaded word. Willingness to be with the discomfort of things like discomfort of experience, willing to say it's uncomfortable, I don't like it, but I'm willing to stay with that in the service of what I want for life. So I'm willing to not know what it's going to look like, but stay with that because this change I'm trying to do is in the service of the life I want. Leaving my partner, finding the new job, leaving the house, going to a social event, moving house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you beautifully summarized how, as human beings, we're forever in a state of change from the moment we're born, from going from the womb to being born into this chaos. But then hopefully we also get support, nurture, comfort, love. And then from that moment on, we're growing, we're changing. Nothing stays the same. On so many levels, it's powerful to try and help somebody make peace with the fact that nothing in life is permanent. And it sounds like you're doing that in a very beautiful way, involving one of the most healing aspects that we've got access to and connection with, which is nature. I mean, there's so many wonderful tangents we could go off on talking about this, but what I really love is that you're so creative with the way that you work with people. And I think that's special, and we need more of that in the world.
That's funny because that's not a word I'd ever use to describe myself. I wouldn't think of myself being creative about it.
Right.
So that's interesting why I don't see that, and you seem to use those words. I struggle with change. I've struggled all my life with change. I like shelter, and I like safety, and I like curling up, and I like being by myself. But the world doesn't like that. It doesn't let you. I've been on this journey of continually putting myself out of my comfort zone to try and grow and lean into newness. And the last 7-8 years for my life has been a lot of new birth and new creation and new birth and new creation. And every time I think I've grown and done something new, then I've learned a lot of lessons. But maybe the main lesson is, I can do that. It is okay. It's scary, and then something good happens, or something happens, and then I've done that, and something happens, something unexpected happens, and I've done that so many times, and every time it's scary. I'm moving to New Zealand. I'm doing a big life change in 2 months' time, and
one of the main hop, skip, and a jump, Matt. What do you mean?
just a hop, skip, and a jump.
Just a hop, skip, and a jump.
It's a big deal. One of the main emotions is fear. I'm scared about the change. I really am scared about the change. I'm scared about how it's going to be. I'm scared about money. I'm scared about being away from my family. I'm scared about being away from my friends. I'm scared about not knowing and starting again. And there's so many things that are new. And I think I can make this decision that's right for us as my family. We're doing this as a family unit. It's right for us because I think I've practiced again and again and again over these years about coming up to a new horizon. And I don't use the word faith all that often, but it's somewhere between faith and trust, that like I just need to lean into this. Like I can see something here that is what I want. And I'm going to lean into some trust, not because trust and faith, I don't know exactly the outcome. And
we
my
can't
metaphor,
know, can we?
when I went into private practice, I remember being terrified about leaving, but I knew that's where I wanted to go to build something. And I had this, I don't know if it started with a dream or just as a powerful image in my head, that I had this image. I've got a picture in front of me of the ocean, so I can look at this every day, and a map of the world with the oceans on it. I had this picture of a sailing boat, and I was leaving Safe Harbor when I was leaving my job. And I was on this ship, and I could see in front of me a barrier of fog all across. So I couldn't see where I was going. But in my metaphor in my head, I knew that leaving what I was doing and going towards this kind of new freelance practice and being able to be more creative, being able to be more innovative, being able to be more self-expressive, I needed to go through the fog. And I had this trust in me that said, it's going to be stormy. It's going to be hard. You're not going to see where you're going to go. But the other side of that, I believed there was the promised land, there's something better.
Yeah.
And I knew that I would feel, maybe I bore it from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy metaphors. I knew that if I turned around and went back to safety, that's a choice and that would be fine. But I would have to make the choice again to leave the harbor because that storm I knew that it wasn't like I could go around the storm or find a time in life where it wouldn't be there. That growth, that change would require going through a really hard time. And it was. I had a really hard time financially. I had to ask for favors financially. I had to be vulnerable and ask for help. I had to go through periods of extreme self-doubt, uncertainty, and change. I had some misery and stress, long working hours, like things were really hard. But the other side of what I kept going through, and it's not short, things take time. This probably took a year and a half of hard graft and scared time to get to the other side where then there's no going back. Then there's a whole new world out there. And I think the visual experience of leaning into it each time for me has somehow taught me you can do that again, but you're going towards is something different. And this time it's a new adventure. I learned a lot personally in faith and trust and tolerating discomfort through those journeys.
I think that's immensely powerful. And one metaphor that I was sat with was that you were flying on instruments. So you had some kind of internal system going on. You couldn't see through the fog, but you were putting your faith in the instruments. And you thought, at some point, I'm going to come through and out of this fog. But you took a massive leap of faith and you lent into all of your internal instruments, guidance systems, intuition. You sat with discomfort, which I think is what a lot of people struggle to do in day-to-day life, is sit with uncertainty, sit with discomfort, sit with not knowing, in the ambivalence. I think a lot of people really wrestle with that.
I think we all do. I think it's our nature to wrestle with those things. And I think you're right. I had a compass bearing. That's my internal. I had a direction I was headed to. And I had a support crew. Like I was not by myself. Like I had my wonderful wife who's very supportive of everything I do. And challenging in the right ways, which is good. You need that from a partner.
Absolutely.
I've my team around me. I've got a therapist. I have a supervisor for my clinical practice. I have a coach as well to help with working through practical steps towards things. And my friends and my wider family, all these people, they play roles in this. So these journeys, and maybe that's always journeys, you kind of see the person that you see doing a great achievement and you think, wow, how did they do this? And they didn't do it alone. No one does this stuff alone. And so I'd say to anybody, whatever you're going through, whether it's the suffering part or whether it's also the growth part, you need people on your team. And it's brave to ask for help and to reach out to your team. But you'll get there better, faster, more equipped. And you know what? The whole experience would be more joyful because you're doing it with people as well.
Community.
We
need community. We're social animals, right? We need each other.
We do. And I'd argue that's probably some of our greatest fears is that when we fear exclusion from our tribe. So some of the most powerful things that people come to therapy or struggle in life with is embarrassment or shame or the fear of social exclusion or being alone and loneliness. Like all those things. If we really go back to our inheritance, that being cast out from your tribe was a significant predictor of threat to life, because we were
Right.
stronger together. If you don't have a tribe, you're not going to survive.
You're not going to survive. Yeah.
So we still have that in us, that if we're cast out, if we do things that could be embarrassing, if we put our heads above the parapet and we're different, or you feel lonely, it's a really unpleasant experience. We're not meant to be alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is why it's so painful to think that many people in the world are, and there are many contributing factors to that, but the one thing that I try and focus on a lot is that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And even if you don't have a community of people, go outside and be around other humans, even if you're not necessarily close with them or they're part of your world in an intimate way. Go and be around people, because I believe that even if you think you've got nobody, going and being out around other people, just watching other people in life, being out there, listening to the hustle and bustle, is a step towards taking some of that pain away, because we are designed to be around each other. So even the visuals, I suppose, maybe like the visuals of nature, visuals of other humans is really important. Go and sit, if you can, in a coffee shop, or go and sit in a park and watch everyone going about their day-to-day lives. Remember that you are still part of something, even though you might for a period feel that you are disconnected from people. Say hello, say good morning to someone on a walk, make eye contact and smile at someone. These little things, even if you feel really lonely and disconnected and you don't feel you've got a community, those micro moments can be incredibly restorative. I don't think the world is heading in a way which is preserving community. I think in some ways it is, but in other ways we're really having to fight to remember the importance of community.
The words you said were incredibly powerful. And I wonder if we're in a crisis of disconnection, where the more we become online, the more that we can live physically separate, the more that it's easier to feel removed from each other, easier to feel disconnected, and easier to feel lonely. And so I really appreciate this is work you share with your clients at times, to say, okay, what small things could you do to just start
Go out
feeling
and
more?
make an effort to say hello to someone, or say good morning, or hold the door open for someone, or
and they'd say, and what they say, but I'm scared to, but it's uncomfortable. I don't want, and you say,
and I say, well, let's take a leap and see, because ultimately it's not going to harm you, but it could potentially then open up the channel within you, which you then feel just for that moment connected. Like chatting to someone in a supermarket queue, or smiling at a child that's in a pushchair as you walk past them. I adore connecting with children, because they're so fearless in many ways. They're just bounding around, smiling and doing their thing. But it's eye contact, it's listening for a laugh. If someone is having a laugh with someone else and you can hear the laughter, I know that you might feel lonely if you're not part of it, but that's still sensory, is still in it. You might chuckle to yourself because you've overheard a conversation that was funny, and even though you weren't part of it, you might go, oh, that's really funny. Trying to remember that there are little ways, subtler ways to connect. You can't jump from feeling completely lonely and isolated to being part of a huge community and feeling safe. But these little noticings of other humans in your day, that's why I always make an effort to speak to someone who's serving me at a supermarket or in a shop. I'll say good morning to people. I play this game of how many times am I going to get a morning back, or you can tell if someone's really not in the mood because their eyes are down and their head is down. But I will, even because
you're that guy, James. Oh,
I'm that guy.
God, you're that
I am
guy.
that guy. I'm ashamed to say.
My God, stop being so cheery.
I will seek your eye contact out, and if I get it, I'll be like, morning. And I don't own a dog, but another thing that gets me thinking sometimes is it's a shame that having to have a pet, even though I understand the massive benefits of that for your well-being, but dog walkers would always talk to each other because they've got a dog. But that's like, well, what about the people that don't have a dog? Why can't you talk to each other? Because sometimes people, I guess, feel fearful or nervous about having nothing as a subject. But to me, in my mind, I don't have a dog, but I'll comment on your dog, or I'll comment on the
I love
weather,
that.
whatever it may be, because I know there's a narrative out there. It's, oh, we always talk about the weather. But if we want to connect with someone, sometimes those little exchanges can count. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think I've got days where I'm like that, and I can notice myself. And I find those days where I'm making more of an effort to be cheery with others around me,
Mm-hmm.
you get a whole lot back from this world. So I
Yeah.
notice that it builds, and it's nice, and you feel more, and I feel like really great, and I'm more bubbly I am when I'm in that place, and I'm fun. When I'm in my
Yeah.
playful, fun place, the world
Yeah.
around me is playful and fun. And even when somebody's
Yeah.
miserable, you go, it's kind of funny. Then you go, you can make a laugh at it. And I know I also have many times where I'm like, don't talk to me, because some days I feel completely full up and I want to block the world out. And I notice those days, almost whatever happens around me will do the opposite. And I can't talk to another person. I'm depleted. Like I can't manage more social connection, even if it's nice social connection. But I appreciate when we first contacted each other, we did a Instagram exchange, and then I said, we said, "Shall we talk at some point?" I said, "Sure." And the first thing I got from you was a phone call, not a text. It was a phone call. You go
Some people would be like,
for proper connection,
I know.
straight for
Yeah.
proper connection, because it's you. And I love it. Actually, I really like that. And I really like to exchange. Some people hate it. I like to exchange voice notes, and like even that's like more than just a text. You can hear my voice. You know, there's a human behind the message. I think there's a book in here about the age of disconnection and the joy of connection that you bring, James, that I think we all need.
Well, we're all in our own way contributing to it. You know, even if you don't think you are. We all have a responsibility to address the things that we think are not going well in the world. And even though you might not be able to make a direct difference to a lot of things, just your attitudes, your connection with the people closest to you, people around you. How do you interact with another human being? Because those micro moments of kindness, empathy, compassion, they count, and they put all those together, and that's a massive force for good in this world. I want to maybe think about just ending our wonderful conversation today on the subject that you're very passionate about, which is being out in nature. It's impossible to speak for everyone, but are there any things that you've found in your experience that can really, as a starting point, be helpful for people if they think, oh, I don't know, I don't really get the whole going out in nature thing, or what do I do when I'm there? Any tips that you might have for people that could really help spark their curiosity about being out in nature again?
I think that last word you said is the key: curiosity. So going into spaces to be curious. So you could take some question cards. What can I find that's mysterious? Let's find 5 things that are round. Let's find something that's spiky. So you could lean into exploring your space, or simply put, go to your local woodland, go somewhere you've been 10 times, 100 times, and go, well, how can I experience this differently? What don't I know about this space? So micro adventures are important. I'd say go in with curiosity and connection. So how could you connect to this space? You might want to feel things with your hands. You might want to be brave and put your feet in the mud or feet in cold water and connect to the physical land, or hug a tree. They all sound glib
I'm a
things
tree
to do.
hugger. I do that.
It might sound like silly things, but all of them are well researched to have noticeable changes and benefits for stress, attention, mental health, physical health. So it doesn't need to be complicated, but under some banners of key things, we'll go with connection and attending, or curiosity, discovery. Find ways to explore and connect with your space, your local space, and then be curious about what actually happens within. Notice what shifts. Oh, I seem to be better that afternoon. Well, it's made me think more about life. Oh, I missed so and so when I was there. Be curious.
Yeah, I love
Have
that.
fun.
Be curious and connect and have fun. Yeah.
Have fun. I'll end that with as well. Play. Play is unbelievably important for all human beings. We think play is the realm of kids, but play is the language of learning. It's how we learn. It's how we first learn. So play is really key. And actually, if you can be in the natural world and play with another, or you can climb a tree. You don't have to do it with anyone else. You can climb a tree. You can do balancing. You could come up mini games. You could pick up sticks and try and throw it through a gap in the tree. Play. When we have our different neural pathways, but one of the key things is that when you're experiencing joy, real joy, you can't also experience fear. It's just not impossible. So actually, if you lean into play and joy, you're also you're getting away from some of the more negative, unpleasant experiences of life. So connection, curiosity, play.
I love that. And just because my brain is running with trying to reach as many people as we can in this conversation, if you can't get out in nature, can you bring nature in?
Yeah, we're absolutely great point. So you can physically bring nature. I've got plants all around me, so bring them in. So like physically going to help with having oxygen in the air, but also seeing them is going to help. But we've looked at research for simulated experiences of nature. So looking at videos, pictures of nature, and they have noticeable benefits on markers, all the same markers I told you about before. So simple things, change the background of your computer to be a natural scene. Play natural sounds through speakers as you're working. Have pictures or real things about nature that you bring into your desk. And I've got around me bits. I've got the water. I've got my plants. Bring nature in. Yeah, that will help too. Yeah,
I think that's really important. It can be something very small, but still significant. Bring in a little plant that you are tending to and put it in eyesight somewhere in your house, or like you've got a picture behind you, because we spend so often looking at our technology.
We spend all day looking at it. Exactly. Mine has this amazing thing on my laptop, which is, I think it's one of the Apple's presets, which is like you get like a walk through the forest. Like it's like a slow video of being in the forest. And sometimes that comes on, I go, isn't that a nice change of pace to, I spend a lot of time at my desk working. Like that is the modern day life, is being on these screens. So get away from them for certain.
Get away from them when you can. Take a lot of breaks when you can. Absolutely. Well, look, Matt, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your experience. I found this conversation very inspiring. I feel like I'm just going to go out into nature even more than I have been doing and be even more curious and more playful. It's going to make a difference, because you've spoken about things that are pertinent and meaningful to every single human being. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure to talk.